Hello and welcome to All About Autism, our monthly charity radio show here on London Greek Radio, aimed at helping us all understand autism better so that we can together create a better society for autistic people and the whole of the autism community. My name is Dr. Chris Papadopoulos and I'll be the host for the next hour, actually up until 8 p.m. I'm a father of 2 autistic children, and I'm also the founder and lead of the London Autism Group charity. I'm also a big Spurs fan, so if there's any pro talk here in the show, I'll be banning it. It's not allowed. Only joking, of course. Even Arsenal fans and talk of Arsenal is welcome on this inclusive show. I'm also joined by my lovely co-host, Sophia Christophi, who herself is autistic, and who is currently studying a PhD in autism. How are you today, Sophia?
I'm fine, thank you. Nice to have my brother in the studio tonight.
Yeah, very exciting. Yes, indeed. We have an amazing guest in the studio in the form of Sophia's brother, Nick Magriz, who is the younger non-autistic brother of Sophia. How are you today, Nick?
I'm doing really good. Thank you very much for having me today.
Our pleasure. Thanks for coming in. It's going to be a really interesting episode because, of course, we're going to be talking about the siblings experience. But first of all, just a quick, how was your New Year's and Christmas? How did it go? Everything okay?
This year was quite one. It's nice to have a bit of time off work with the family and, just to take a bit of a break from work. How about yourself?
Yeah, not bad. I still didn't win the coin in the Vasilobita. It's about a 10-year barren run. Although I watched a few good movies and shows and recharged. Thanks for asking. So, as our listeners may know, on each monthly episode of this show, we focus on a different topic connected to autism. And for today's show, yes, we'll be talking about a topic very often overlooked, which is the sibling experience. So by siblings, what I'm talking about here are brothers and sisters, either autistic or neurotypical, but also perhaps a cousin or a close friend who've grown up with the autistic person in their family. The reason it's important to talk about this topic is because the sibling perspective is often overlooked, and research shows that siblings are particularly vulnerable to poor mental health. So it's really important to try and explore why this might be and what we can do to help siblings with their well-being, but also to learn from siblings as well. There's a lot to learn from their perspective. Supporting the sibling isn't something we should ever overlook, because a happy and healthy family unit as a whole is going to be incredibly beneficial for everyone, including, of course, the autistic person. As always, we really welcome any questions or points of view from our listeners. So if any of you have anything that you'd like to ask or share, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. You can text us or WhatsApp us at 0737 661 1033. That's 0737 661 1033. Or you can email us at studio@lgr.co.uk, or you can send me a message or a tweet on Twitter. My handle is at Chris Paps. So I'll be keeping an eye on that during the show. We'd really value your input and we'd love to hear from you. I'd also like to just take a quick moment to say a huge thanks to the wonderful Helen Michaelides for all of her incredible help with the show in previous episodes, particularly in terms of hosting the show. Helen is going to be continuing to support the show through editorial input and, as always, championing the London Autism Group charity, which we're all so grateful for. So with that said, Nick, as I said, thanks for joining the show today. Would you mind introducing yourself a little bit to our listeners and telling people a little bit about your background and who you are? That'd be great.
Absolutely. Once again, Chris, thanks so much for having me. I think this is a really interesting segment, and I'm proud to be part of it. My name's Nick Magriz. I'm 24 years old. I'm the younger brother of Sophia, who has autism. I don't have a diagnosis myself. I was born in Islington, moved out to Hertfordshire with a family. Just before COVID, I moved out independently, living on my own. I went to university in central London. I'm a business development manager for a kitchen manufacturing company. And me and my sister, we have a very close bond. We do a lot of things together, and we generally spend a lot of time together.
And it's just the two of you, isn't it? And your mum and stepfather, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Sophia, are you happy to have Nick in the studio today?
Yeah, I'm happy to have him here. It'd be nice to hear about his experiences as well, growing up with someone who's autistic, and how that might have impacted him.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, Nick, just to confirm for our listeners, you're not autistic as far as you know. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I've not got any diagnoses. I've not felt the need to seek a diagnosis myself. But, being with Sophia, I know a lot about autism. But yeah, I don't have any diagnoses.
Fantastic. All right. Well, as I said, great that you're here, and we're going to be hearing a lot more about your perspective and your story, and getting maybe some tips and bits of advice about what other siblings in their situation can do. That'll be really, really useful. Also from you, Sophia. But now it's time for a short break. After which, as I said, we're going to be delving into Nick and Sophia's stories a little bit more. And a reminder that if you'd like to send us a message on WhatsApp or text message, please do. You can do so with your name. I can read out your name if you wish, or you can do it anonymously. The number is 0737 661 1033. That's 0737 661 1033. And that can be related to this siblings topic or anything whatsoever with regard to autism. We'd love to hear from you. Before we do anything else, Sophia is going to read out this lovely letter that has been sent to us by an 8-year-old girl who listens to our show and who also has a twin brother who is autistic. So Sophia, over to you to read out this lovely letter.
So the letter says, "Hello, I want to tell you a few things about my twin brother. I've asked him first if I can talk about him, and he said it's fantastic. He is funny, kind, sensitive, and very friendly. He talks to lots of people and asks lots of questions about different things, especially about movies and sports brands. He knows them all. He also likes to talk about buses, tubes, and food shops. He loves to sing and dance to really loud music when everyone is sleeping. I'm not sure the neighbours like his choice of music. We snuggle in bed and he tells me there is darkness in his eyes. This means he's afraid of the dark. And I whisper back that it's okay, and he twirls my hair, which is a bit annoying, but I let him do it anyway. He finds it hard to go to sleep. He enjoys watching quiz shows like Tipping Point and The Chase, and he remembers a lot of things. He has a great memory. His favourite snack is crisps, and his favourite flavour is salt and vinegar. He also likes to help Mum cook, but he doesn't eat it. He gets a bit anxious when we go out, and I hold him tight so he doesn't feel worried or scared. Sometimes I don't know how to help him, and I talk to my mum and dad. But when I get upset and I cry, he runs and gets me a tissue and hugs me and gives me advice like, everyone gets angry and upset sometimes. This is why I wouldn't change anything about him. He is my twin brother and I love him so much."
Oh, that is so, so beautiful, isn't it? Thanks for reading that out, Sophia. What do you guys think about this? Nick, have you got any immediate thoughts? Does any of this kind of resonate with you when you were younger?
I think it's fantastic. They're 8-year-olds and they're so receptive. I think that's amazing. They've got such a good understanding of each other, and you can see that they've got such a good relationship from a very young age.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that strikes me is that they, like you said, they've got this really, really close relationship, but also it sounds to me like this girl is really looking after her brother's mental health and well-being. You know, she's really in tune with his needs, and I think that's going to be really great for her in terms of her own emotional development and her own sort of wisdom. You know, she's becoming wise early. However, on the other side, it could maybe be perhaps quite difficult, for so much of that to be on the shoulders of a young girl. But so it's a complicated one, isn't it? And I love the fact that the other thing I like about this is that, it just shows that every autistic person's different. We should never stereotype. This twin brother of hers has got his own personality, his own way about him. And that's a really important point to get across, that everybody is different. And the other thing that stands out for me, lastly, is that, when she's upset, he's the one, who's really empathic, really in tune, really supporting her and saying the right things. And again, I think that's a really valuable lesson that, this whole ridiculous myth about autistic people not having empathy. I mean, this is showing it even at such a young age, so it's a beautiful thing. I don't know if you've got any other thoughts about that.
Yeah, it definitely challenges the misconception that autistic people lack empathy or don't know how to show their emotions. It sounds like they've got a really good bond, and she has a fantastic insight at 8 years old of her brother's needs, and hopefully they both grow up to be very comfortable in who they are.
Yeah, she just sounds absolutely amazing, and I love that she says at the end that she wouldn't change anything about him. That's That's fantastic. So with that said, we'll focus now on your story a little bit more, Nick. So thanks again for coming in. So Nick, tell us a little bit about when you first learned that Sophia was autistic. What were your sort of immediate feelings, reactions, and how did it sort of impact upon your relationship?
That's a really good question. So when we found out Sophia was autistic, she was 16, I was 14 at the time. We both went to the same secondary school. We've always been very close from a very young age. Our relationship didn't really change much after the diagnosis, because from a young age I always knew Sophia was slightly different to the other children her age. But now we just suddenly had a word for it, autism. The relationship didn't really change much. I think that's because I was younger and she, from a very young age, was looking after me throughout school, helping me with my homework. Perhaps if I was the older sibling, being neurotypical, it might have been slightly different. But the relationship didn't change at all.
That's fantastic. And so you remember that, do you, Sophia? Is that how
Our
it is for
roles
you?
have reversed now, though, because he's looking after me now, so that's nice.
Right. So you would sort of support him with the academic side of things, right, growing up?
Yeah.
That's nice. So Nick struggled with that, did he? And was it sort of difficult for you, Nick, being a couple of years younger, being in the same secondary school as Sophia, and perhaps being the younger one looking up to the older sibling who might have been having a few challenges and feeling a little bit uncertain or anxious about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love Sophia very much. I always wanted to make sure she's okay. I could see she wasn't entirely comfortable hanging around with people her own age, and she almost looked a bit out of place in school. She didn't fully kind of grasp the whole secondary school experience. So I was a bit apprehensive about leaving her too often. I was quite a reserved person myself from a young age, quite a shy person, so I didn't have a large group of friends. So me and Sophia would often chat and talk at lunchtime, and then I would go and see my friends, but I always wanted to make sure that she was okay, just because I always had an instinct before we found out she was autistic, that she wasn't completely comfortable in school.
It's interesting you call it an instinct. I'm wondering whether, like the earlier letter that we read out, whether or not you were just perhaps more exposed to her well-being and her needs from a younger age. Obviously you didn't know she was autistic, but you knew that there were different things about Sophia, and so maybe you were exposed to her, and so you sort of began to learn to understand what her needs are and adapt yourself early on in life. So perhaps you built your strategies, you built who you are, your compassion, and that sort of supportive approach earlier on because of what you were exposed to. I don't know if you'd agree with that?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think it really starts in the home, because we're very close in age. There's only 2 years between us. So if I think of myself as a 6-year-old and Sophia being 8, I was a completely different person to her. Even though we had a very good relationship, we still do. We're both completely different people. So I knew from a young age that Sophia had certain needs, different needs to mine. So I think that's where the instinct starts, because I could physically see the difference. But like I said, it starts at home.
Yeah, 100%. And Sophia, what was it like for you to having a younger brother at secondary school who, perhaps was sort of looking out for you as the older sibling? And did you have any? Have you got any kind of key memories or any view of that?
Yeah, I remember feeling really reassured to have my brother in the same school, because I had that familiar person. Before that, I always felt quite alone. If there was a problem, I don't know if I would have been able to go and tell someone that was a problem. But having my brother there was peace of mind for me. But equally, I felt a bit anxious about maybe holding him back, because he was worried about me, and I didn't want that to stop him from going off and making his own friends and having his own interactions, because he was too busy worried about kind of what I'm up to. But I think he developed his own friends as well, and he still checked in on me as well, so we got a balance.
You figured out the balance, and again, you're showing your empathy and your concern for him, in his friendships, and that's really good.
Growing up, I was aware that I struggled with a lot of things, and as a result, people had to make accommodations for me, but that did also make me feel bad that I didn't know I was autistic at the time, so I felt like maybe I was stopping other people from having fun or doing the things that they wanted to do because I couldn't cope with it, but I also didn't have a name for it to be able to understand it myself. So I was concerned that Nick would miss out because of me.
That's quite sad in a way. Did you tune into that, Nick? Were you aware that Sophia, from reasonably young age, was feeling like she was, putting other people out or being, a problem for other people? Did you feel that? Were you aware of that?
I guess that's right. From a young age, like I said before, Sophia had a particular set of needs, a lot greater than my own, and that did take up a lot of our mum's time and attention as well. So naturally, I did get slightly less attention, but that was okay because I was fully aware that Sophia needed additional help, needed extra attention to account for her needs. So yeah, that was quite apparent from early on.
The other thing about your story, what your perspective was, Sophia, I think what it tells me is that having a familiar face, especially someone like your brother who you see all the time, that's such a reassuring kind of safety blanket to have in a very scary place that a school often is. And
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
I think it's maybe one good strong reason not to separate your children into two different schools, one for maybe a specialist school for autistic children, and a neurotypical sibling in a mainstream, because of course you can I suppose there's pros and cons, but you do have this big pro of being in the presence of your brother as necessary, and that surely would have supported you and helped you as you've said. Yeah. So what were some of the other main ways that you supported Sophia over the years, Nick?
Well, it was only ever the three of us, me, my mum and my sister, so I didn't want to add any further strain or complication to our mum, so I didn't want to draw any more attention or just add any more inconvenience. So I kind of, like I said before, I was very shy, quite a quiet kid, so I'd often keep myself to myself, and I was happy to wait my turn. I didn't want to cause any more stress. But later on in life, I was starting to encourage Sophia to challenge herself to do things that she would probably find difficult or uncomfortable. For example, I was working in Liverpool Street a few years back, and I'd spoken to my work colleagues who I was going out for work drinks with about Sophia. They'd heard all about her. They really wanted us to come. So I said, Sophia, get on the train, come and see me in Liverpool Street. And that's something she would never have done before. She would never get on the train by herself before, travel to central London. But I gotta tell you the truth, I did kind of make her feel bad. I said, you'll be letting down my work colleagues. That's a bit unfair, but
you used whatever strategy you could, right?
Exactly. Ultimately, she did challenge herself. She got on the train. I met her at Liverpool Street, and we ended up having a fantastic evening out with my work colleagues. But that's like a tick in a box. She's done something completely new. She would never have done that before. So, with my experiences, I try to kind of push her and get her to do more things as well, and to live a better life.
Because you have confidence that if she takes that step, she's capable, she can get there. That would be good for her. I mean, obviously, if you felt that if she took that step, it would be too overwhelming, then you probably wouldn't have pushed, right? You knew that it was worth pushing. Yeah,
even though she was reluctant to do it, I know she's capable of so much more. She obviously has a lot of anxiety and is nervous about new situations, but I know she's 100% capable of doing these things. It's just having that little extra push.
Do you remember that? Do you remember that, Sophia?
Yeah, and I think that's the difference. Like, Nick knows that I'm capable and will push me, whereas I don't believe that I'm capable, so I probably hold myself back from doing a lot more things that I probably could do. So I remember taking that trip the first time on the train on my own on a Friday night to Liverpool Street. Don't recommend it. It was really busy. But Nick kind of thought about it in a way that I hadn't, because when I got to Liverpool Street and it was so packed and I just kind of stood there thinking I have no idea what I'm supposed to do, Nick had gone and stood on the top of the stairs so that he could see me out. So he'd spotted me straight away and then called me and said, look up, I'm right here. Right. Otherwise, I would have probably just stood there for like the next half an hour trying to decide what I'm supposed to do next.
Right. Was it mainly an anxiety issue for you to do something like that?
I think it's a combination of things. It's the anxiety. It's not knowing the people that I was going to meet. It's the train journey there, the crowds, the whole sort of the whole interaction.
Yeah. All the unpredictability.
Yeah, a lot of unpredictability. Yeah.
Makes sense. Well, that's great that you were able to encourage her, and that I love that you had confidence in your sister, and you encouraged her to do things, and you were supporting her through the process, So that's absolutely fantastic. And Nick, how has supporting your sister overall during your life had a positive impact on the person that you are today, would you say?
Well, it's really impacted my life positively. Supporting her from a young age and just understanding her needs, I think it's made me quite an independent person. I'd like to think I'm quite mature from a very young age, quite independent. Like I moved out from the family home at the age of 22, lived by myself. I try new things in life because I see the struggles that Sophia goes through every single day, and she really pushes herself, so I've got no excuse.
Right,
so she's really positively impacted my life by just, I need to think I'm so grateful I can easily do so many things in life. So yeah, that
right, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So you're seeing it as if you haven't got perhaps the challenges that Sophia might have, and therefore you've got to make the most of that. And I suppose also the fact that you were almost like a leader by the sounds of it for Sophia in many respects growing up. So you've got that sort of leadership style, that confidence that you grew, and it's made you a better man today by the sounds of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. I mean that's the thing, isn't it? I think that is one of the big advantages, and I think the research in this topic also demonstrates that, which is that siblings are going to be exposed. Yes, they might be exposed to more complicated, maybe more emotionally complex issues at a younger age than you might ordinarily have exposed a child. But on the other hand, that can massively fast forward the development of that child, and by the time you're a young adult or, slightly older adult, you're just further along in the game of life, I suppose, aren't you? You've got the wisdom that perhaps others need more time and more exposure to different complicated things would need, whereas you've had that. So that's great. But on the other hand, I suppose there are many challenges again, because you are exposed, aren't you, to potentially scary things, confusing things from a young age. It's a lot perhaps for you, Nick. I don't know if you would agree with that, but I suppose it has that complexity. Was it a burden for you? Were there any challenges? How did you cope with that side of stuff?
I think my challenges from a very young age quite unique to myself. It was only, like I said before, it was only ever me, Mum and Sophia at home, and obviously with Sophia having her needs, Mum did a fantastic job in raising us, but being the youngest, I always struggled with the fact that I was the youngest and I couldn't really do anything more to help. I was 2 years younger. I wished I was older just so I could somehow impact or somehow take a load off of Mum's shoulders to help out and just positively contribute. I wouldn't get that much attention at home because a lot of it was focused on Sophia, but I knew that was okay because I knew the difference that between equity and equality. So Mum loved us equally, obviously, but with Sophia having certain needs, she did require more attention, and I knew that was okay from a very early age. There were some things that I would miss out on, but they're all not as important as the relationship that we have today is, if that makes sense. So I think just being the younger sibling in that situation, I just wish I could have done more as a kid.
Wow, what a brother you've been, Nick. Honestly, to think in that way, that's pretty incredible. You're lucky, Sophia, to have such an amazing.
I am very lucky
brother. Yeah,
and we do get on really, really well. Like, we are very different in a lot of ways, but we are very close. And a lot of people think we're twins because we're so sort of in tune with each other. But he has helped me in lots of situations. Even now, like if we go somewhere or I'm starting to feel slightly uncomfortable and I'm not really sure how I'm meant to navigate the situation, I literally just have to look at Nick, and he kind of knows, and he's like, will come in and sort of save me from a conversation if it's all going wrong and I'm struggling. But yeah, I am lucky to have him as my brother and a mum as well who's been amazing.
Yeah.
And equally, I'm lucky to have a sister like Sophia as well. She's taught me so much. Being an older sibling, she used to help me with my homework, which I used to dread every single night. She used to, obviously being a lot more academic than myself, she would help me out in so many different regards, and really taught me a lot about my current values and morals that I have today.
Yeah, amazing. Absolutely fantastic. So Nick, have you got any main bits of advice that you'd give to other siblings listening? You know, other perhaps... or either autistic or neurotypical siblings, you know, maybe a little bit younger than yourself, you know, or similar age. You know, have you got any main bits of advice from your experiences that you'd like to convey?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the most important thing is to try and see the world from their perspective. I know what Sophia likes and what she doesn't like, what she can and can't do, and work on things that matter to them, but also try to push them as well. So, for example, going into central London is a very easy thing for me to do. We often go out for dinner together, we have coffees together, but if it's a new location, I would happily just go there. But Sophia, she would need to know what the menu is, what route we're taking to go there. That's typically seen as inconvenient for me to try and gather all that information, but if it makes her life easier and it actually gets her to go, then why not do it? Just, you know, forward her the link to the menu, tell her exactly what route you're taking. It only takes a couple of minutes and it makes her life so much easier, and she will end up doing a lot more things. So there is a little bit of compromise. And I would say also include your siblings as well. If you have an autistic sibling, make accommodations for them. If they do find certain things difficult, like a certain social event, like a party or something like that, still invite them, even if they're not likely going to attend, because it's still much appreciated that you've thought about inviting them. You want to include them, even if they're not 100% up for it, but, you know, make the accommodation, make the consideration, and bring them along.
I think that's a really important point, because some of the research that I've looked at with this topic is it sort of suggests that actually sometimes a lot of siblings get a lot of pressure from their peers to not involve this autistic sibling, because, you know, it's you know, more complexity, more challenging or whatever, and they just want to go off and not have to worry about any of that sort of thing. And so there can be quite additional pressure there for the sibling. So your advice is no, reject that and prioritize your sibling, as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And what about you, Sophia? Have you got any advice for siblings?
Yeah, just to pick up on the point that Nick said, I think, like, when you're planning to do something with your autistic sibling, if you know there's small adjustments that you can make that would help them, for example, for me, knowing what train route we're taking, knowing where the location is, knowing what time we're going, what time we're leaving, if that's not a big deal to somebody like Nick, but he can give me that information, which makes a huge difference to me, then try and offer those small accommodations, because he's right, it does make the difference between being able to go or not. We recently went out for a meal somewhere completely new, and part of the reason why I was able to go was because I had all the details in advance, so I could remove some of that unpredictability. Nick didn't really mind either way, he was happy just to get on the train and go, but having that information actually meant that I could go as well.
Yeah. It sounds to me that Nick is very much like in tune with your particular needs. Is part of your advice related to that? Like, work out what the specific needs are for the autistic sibling, and try as much to be accommodating to those. Of course, the needs are going to vary, aren't they, from person to person? Yeah.
So everyone's different. But as we heard in the letter earlier, the 8-year-old twins also very in tune with each other at an early age, and I think siblings do have that a lot of the time. You just need to make a bit of time to sort of get to know the differences, particularly if one sibling is autistic and the other one isn't, then obviously there's a bigger difference between the two. But it's the same for autistic people, getting to know what their non-autistic sibling likes and doesn't like. It works both ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a really interesting point, actually, because before we had the diagnosis of autism, Sophia would reject a lot of invites to certain activities or certain events, and the answer was simply she didn't want to go. But there wasn't a real reason behind it, and that made it quite difficult. But as soon as she started saying, oh, I don't know how we're going to get there, I don't know who's going to be there, and started giving us specific details, it's kind of like a help me, help you situation. Sophia being autistic, she was able to be very specific with her needs, which allows me to now accommodate for her and make certain accommodations, so we end up doing activities together.
Yeah, fantastic. And your relationship is all the better for it in the long run, isn't it?
Yeah.
Amazing. Quick reminder that if you do want to send us a message that you'd like us to look at, I think we do have a bit of time, we can do that, so please feel free to. It's 0737 661 1033. That's 0737 661 1033. So if you'd like to send us a message, WhatsApp, text, please do that. So we're just wrapping up this episode of the siblings perspective. And one last question that I have, which I do think is quite important that we briefly discuss, is that, as I said at the outset of the show, siblings, the research does show that siblings of autistic people can be quite vulnerable to poor mental health. And obviously your relationship is fantastic. It's very positive. We've been talking about all the strengths. But perhaps we should just give that fact a little bit of attention. So, Nick, from your perspective, why do you think maybe some siblings are quite vulnerable to poor mental health?
I can see how that does happen. I think from a young age where the autistic child has a lot more of the attention, perhaps the non-autistic child almost suppresses or keeps in their emotions, and that ultimately builds up over time. That isn't the case with myself, but I can totally see how that happens.
Yeah. And I suppose it just shows, doesn't it, that one other, main bit of advice that we should give is that, yes, as a sibling, we would encourage you to be accommodating and supportive to your autistic sibling, but at the same time, be accommodating and supportive of your own needs, your own mental health. If you're struggling, do prioritize your own needs, because you're not going to be any good to anybody if you're struggling yourself. I guess that's quite a hard ask if you're a young child, though. Thinking about my neurotypical son who's 10, and he has two autistic brothers. He clearly does sometimes emotionally struggle with it, because I think for him, like you said, the attention is sometimes a little bit more on the brothers, or maybe we're making, as parents, more accommodations. At least visibly he can see these accommodations being made for the other two children. So what we try to do when we parent is try to sort of perhaps put more into the neurotypical brother than perhaps you would ordinarily, to try and sort of balance the books, so to speak, because otherwise that child's going to be quite vulnerable to sadness, stress, anxiety. So do what you can as parents. It's quite difficult, but also prioritise their needs, I would say. I don't know if you've got a view of this, Sophia?
Yeah, I could see how similar issues could arise in situations where both siblings are autistic, especially if they've got maybe like conflicting needs. You might have an autistic child that is really oversensitive to sensory stuff, and then another autistic child who needs that sensory stimulation, and there's a clash there. But I think ultimately everybody needs to be understanding of each other, whether they're autistic or not. So I need to be aware of Nick's needs the same way he's aware of mine. And if everyone does their bit to make those small allowances and adjustments, then hopefully people can have happy, enjoyable relationships.
Yeah, and if it's not there with quick results, it can develop over time, can't it? The improvement in the relationship, the improvement in communication. Don't be too fatalistic about it. If it isn't working at the moment, so long as you are trying your best and you're looking at perhaps getting support from experts, or reevaluating your strategies and constantly trying to do the best thing, over time things can get better for sure.
It's usually a lot of small little changes that accumulate over a period of time that you start to see big differences.
I guess this is a nice segue for me to say that if you're a parent or a sibling or an autistic person or autistic sibling, whoever it is, if you do want to find out more about this and you want to get some more support or advice, of course the charity is available, but Nick has very kindly offered to also give any one-to-one support as well. So his email, Nick, what is your email? Do you want to give that out?
Yeah, absolutely. It's nick.smacris nick.outlook.com. That's nick.smacris@outlook.com.
Thanks so much. It was really kind of you to be there for people if they have any questions or...
Any questions at all, any bits of advice, if you want to speak to me personally, that's perfectly fine. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you.
Brilliant. Also, I'd like to highlight that the charity does have a monthly Zoom-based siblings support group. We're really proud of that. Not a lot of charities do this. So every month, it takes place on the first Tuesday of every month at 7:30 p.m. If you'd like to participate in that, if you're a sibling and you want to get support, you want to maybe meet other siblings, please do feel free to contact the charity. A reminder that our email is contact@londonautismgroupcharity.com. Sorry, that's .org rather, .org. That's contact@londonautismgroupcharity.org. So do drop us an email and we can schedule you in for that, so you can come along and be part of that. Also, I'd like to say that the charity, of course, is doing their community cafe initiative. So we've got lots of initiatives, and we have the one at the Cypriot Community Centre in Wood Green, which takes place on the last Saturday of every month at 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. So if you're Greek Cypriot, or anyone actually whatsoever, don't have to be Greek, you're welcome to come along to that. That's the last Saturday of every month at 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's completely free, no registration needed. Just come along. Next month, we're going to be talking about a very important topic of sleeping. So a lot of autistic children in particular have some sleeping issues, and we're going to have Dr. Yoriil Bavloboulou as a special guest to discuss this. She is an expert in this topic and is a lecturer at UCL. So do tune in next month for us to be discussing this topic. The show will be on the 2nd of February at 7 p.m. 2nd of February at 7 p.m. I'd like to say thanks again so much to Sophia, my amazing co-host, but also Nick for your wisdom and your experience and your honesty. You've really you've opened up and given us a personal take on things. I really appreciate that. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure to be part of this.
And thanks to you again, Sophia.
Thanks very much.
All right, and of course, lastly, thanks to all of you listening out there, and have a lovely month.